אוקיי, ערב טוב עוד פעם, כרגיל, בואו נשאל אתכם איך אתם הערב. שנייה. All right, great. Let's get a few more responses and we'll start. No more? Okay, good. Okay, so we are behind most of the holidays, and I think we are going to have a smooth sailing to the end of the semester. We were supposed to have 4 talks today, but one of the students decided to create the course. He is in China. He was not able to come to Israel. His flights were canceled, and the time difference is too big, so he elected to quit. So we are going to have 3 presenters today, Maria, Hadar, and Chen. Before we start, any questions, requests, complaints? Nothing, okay. All right, so without any further ado, Maria, you are going to go first. Let me just allow you to share the screen. And go ahead. Oh, sorry, one more announcement before you start. I ask every presenter to send me the PowerPoint, either as a PowerPoint or a PDF, whatever is more convenient for you, and also the 2 pages write-up. That's very important, so please, at the end of your presentation, don't forget to send it.
Okay, can you see my screen now?
Yeah, but can you speak up?
Yes.
Okay,
Can
better.
you see? Okay. Great. Okay. Okay, and you can see my laser as well, right? The laser pointer.
I think you need to go to the presentation mode.
Wait.
You can see your cursor, but laser is only when you go to the presentation mode.
Yes, I was in presentation mode, but then I couldn't share, I didn't share the presentation mode, so I'm not sure how to do that. If anybody wants to help me.
No, yeah. Just click there. Yeah. Click there.
Okay, this is it, right?
Yes.
We can see now.
Okay, great.
Perfect.
Okay, so today I'm going to talk about the Wangu Suk Scandal. Hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. So Wang was a Korean, still is a Korean scientist. His publications in 2004 and 2005 in the field of stem cell research were considered innovative and revolutionary. But in 2009, he was convicted of embezzling and bioethical violations. So today we're going to explore what happened in between. As you can see, this is the cover of Time magazine. So this wasn't, a small event that went unnoticed by the international community. He was well known when he was successful, and his fall was very public as well. So he actually started becoming famous in the 1990s after he managed to clone a few animals. And then he went into human cloning, which is what we're going to discuss today. So let's start with some background information about stem cell research. So this is how a baby is made. We have an oocyte, which is beitzit, an egg cell. Oocyte is the correct term in this case. When a sperm cell and an oocyte meet, we have totipotent stem cells. They can differentiate into any type of cell. So here we have the blastocyte. This is the shiryan. Okay, this is the external part to the embryo itself, right? And then we have the blastocytes, the pluripotent stem cells that later differentiate into the baby itself. These pluripotent stem cells later differentiate into the endoderm, mesoderm, and ectoderm. They're called multipotent stem cells. And they can differentiate into the respiratory system, circulatory system, nervous system, basically any type of cell that we have. So we start out with these totipotent stem cells that have unlimited potential, and then as we go down, we have less and less potential for differentiation. We get from A to B to C to D using differentiation factors that different cells are susceptible to different differentiation factors. This isn't our topic today, but this is the basic science of how everything works. The idea is that if you have these pluripotent stem cells, you can differentiate them into anything that you want. You can clone humans, you can create different cells, you can create potentially different organs, and then if somebody needs an organ transplant, you can just grow them a new liver or a new lung. So obviously, everybody wants to be able to do that, but in 2004, they still didn't know how to create these pluripotent stem cells in the lab. So in 2004, Wong published this paper in Science magazine, Science, evidence of a pluripotent. So basically, yes, slower.
You were blanking for a little bit, but now it's okay.
Okay, so this was published in Science, evidence of a pluripotent human embryonic stem cell line derived from a cloned blastocyte. Basically, Wong was claiming that they were able to create this in the lab, which meant that they had pluripotent stem cells that they could later research and potentially use for medical purposes. This is how this works. This is the system that he claimed to have created. If you take an egg cell, an oocyte from any donor, doesn't matter if they're related to the person you want to clone or not, you can take any egg cell, human egg cell, obviously, remove the nucleus, and then you have this empty egg cell, empty oocyte. Then you take cells from the person that you want to clone, you remove the nucleus, and then you fuse it with this empty egg. You use electroporation, electricity to activate this egg cell, and this is how you have a cloned egg. And then you can do either of two things. You can use a surrogate mother. Obviously, this isn't done with humans. This is unethical, but this is something that is done with animals. This is how Dolly was created, for example. Or you can use it for therapeutic cloning. You can grow the cells in the lab, use the differentiation factors that we discussed earlier, and you have a tissue culture. So for example, you can grow nerve cells in the lab and then research them or implant them in somebody. This is a technique that worked with animals before 2004. So this isn't a completely new thing that he discovered, but people were doubting whether it could be done with humans. They were doubting if it could be done with mammals, and then it was disproven because they actually managed to do that. But they didn't know if it is going to work with humans because it is such a complicated organism. But he claimed that they were able to do that. So this is the abstract of this revolutionary paper. Obviously, it is completely false. They were not able to do anything. Otherwise, we wouldn't be discussing it today. But somatic cell nuclear transfer technology has recently been used to generate animals with common genetic composition. In this study, we report the derivation of a pluripotent embryonic stem cell line from a cloned human blastocyte. Basically, they said, everything that you weren't able to do, we did here, and we did it successfully. This is not true. They were not able to do this, which means that everything here is a lie. So they're saying that this imaginary cell that they created displayed typical embryonic cell morphology and cell surface markers, was capable of differentiating into embryonic bodies in vitro. So this is all a lie. They were making things up based on previous research in animals. They were showing people what they thought was going to happen if they were actually successful. And teratomas, basically, the definitive way of confirming that you've created pluripotent stem cells is you take the cells, you inject them into an immunodeficient mice, and you're supposed to receive this tumor that has all three layers that we discussed earlier, the mesoderm, ectoderm, and endoderm. And this is the confirmation that you've been able to do this. Because they weren't able to create the cells, then everything here did not actually happen. Following this paper, there were some suspicions. So people were, really, they weren't criticizing him. They really respected him. They believed it was true. It looked very true, but there were some allegations about bioethical infractions. So one of his students said in an interview that she donated oocytes for the study, which is a major violation. And then it was claimed that actually two students donated their oocytes. One denied the allegations, an investigation was launched. He claimed that they were misunderstood because the interview was in English and they can't speak English properly, so it's not true. He was exonerated, reinstated, and later even promoted. In January 2005, a law was passed in South Korea that prohibited paying for oocyte donors for their donation. Up until this point, it was considered unethical, but not illegal. But now it was also illegal. This is relevant for the future because up until this point, theoretically, everything he was doing was legal, but not exactly ethical. So in 2005, they published another paper in Science as well. Patient-specific embryonic stem cells derived from human scant blastocytes. He said, we took these cells that we created in 2004, although even in 2005, they hadn't created them. So they continued with this lie and they published another paper that said, actually, we took these stem cells and we were able to culture them and differentiate them into 11 different cell types. These cell lines can be grown in a lab, and he started making claims about being able to cure people with them. This was, a huge news story. People were saying that he was a hero. They were sure that any moment he's going to cure Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, every single disease by using this technology. Especially in Korea, he was considered a national hero. He made friends with government officials, politicians, the prime minister. So, he was a huge hero. Basically what they said, we were successful, we did this, we created the stem cells and then we were to differentiate them. They took skin cells from patients with disease or injury, creating the cell lines. You can study those diseases, for example, how a liver becomes dysfunctional, how a brain becomes dysfunctional over time. And you can take these cell lines that match the donors and you can translate them into the donors and they would not be rejected because they're exactly the same. So this was huge. People were sure that this is it. The cure is here. And he even said that he was going to use this to try and cure a 10-year-old boy with a serious spinal injury. So after he claimed that he was going to be used to cure a 10-year-old boy, a former student of his decided to contact the media about these possible fraudulent claims. So he worked at the lab, and even though he didn't see anything fraudulent happening, he said that based on what they were doing back in 2003, there is absolutely no way that this data is real. There is no way that they did all of this work just in 1 year. He could not contact the university because Wang was such a star that nobody would have believed him. So he went to the media. After, he also contacted Wong's American research partner and told him about it. And this partner began claiming that some of the results are fraudulent. He didn't know for sure, but he said that, based on the data that he had seen, he wasn't sure that it was true. And I think he was very scared of being associated with Wong, and he wanted to be out. Investigation was launched and Wong was suspended. He claimed that there was a mix-up with some of the cell line photos. Then he said that, there was a contamination, and he said that he was being sabotaged. He claimed all different things, basically saying that he wasn't at fault and other people were doing this to him. This American research partner contacted Science. He wanted the paper to be retracted. Scientists from all over the world, really important people, volunteered to go over the raw data and make sure that everything was real, because they really believed Wong. They believed that what he did was real, but he refused to share this information with him. And there was a serious investigation that proved that it was all a lie. So along with an investigation to the scientific facts, bioethical infractions were also discovered. Basically, they reinvestigated him for the 2004 claims and new claims as well. And this is how the oocyte scandal was discovered. Basically, in order to donate oocytes, women have to go on a regime of hormones before that. This has side effects. This has potential serious side effects. And, it's not an easy thing to do. There are much easier things that you can donate, like blood or sperm cells, but oocytes are a whole different thing. And there's also the potential for abuse when it comes to women that really want that money and need that money and are willing to do whatever it takes to, to get it. So he claimed to have used 242 oocytes from 16 volunteers in his 2004 publication, and 184 eggs from 18 women in a 2005 article. Investigations revealed that Wong had in fact collected over 2,000 oocytes from at least 119 different women. 2 of them were researchers from his own laboratory. So, this is a huge scandal, because this isn't just about the science. This is about, the ethics and everything that he was doing, and whether other people knew about it, because the hospitals knew about it, the university knew about it, and everybody were covering it up. So there are 4 groups of volunteers. The first are legal voluntary donors, who receive little or no compensation for the extraction of their eggs. But in theory, this is the best situation, but it's not really true because of informed consent, which we'll discuss in the next slide. There was the paid donors, who were each paid approximately $400 US. This was legal until January 2005, but as we said, not ethical, and allegedly did it after the deadline of January 1st as well. There were donations in exchange of approximately this amount of dollars in discounting IVF treatments. So I'm not sure whether this is legal or not, but the problem is that when oocytes are taken for IVF, they are graded. So you have good grade and bad grade, and they took the best graded ones for research and left the worst graded ones for the actual IVF treatments without telling the donors. Also, he took eggs from 2 researchers working for him who were coerced into donating oocytes for research. This is Helsinki Committee violation. This is a huge international thing. This isn't just about Korean law and ethics in the scientific community. In all of these cases, the donors were lied to. We'll talk about informed consent, but they were also told that this could benefit them personally and their family. But we know that the nucleus from the eggs is actually removed. So it's not going to help them because it's not going to be used for them. As we can see by the numbers, 85 out of 119 women belong in this group. So this wasn't, an isolated, donor or 2. The report concluded that women in all 4 categories, including voluntary donors, were either under societal, personal, or work-related pressure to donate their eggs for research, or not fully informed of the actual details involving the egg retrieval procedure. This is the issue of informed consent. When donations are given, patients, the donors need to sign an informed consent form, which means that they understand the risks and they understand what their donation is being used for. Even in cases where informed consent was signed, it was signed only once and not every single donation, which is not how it's supposed to be. And because of all the violations, we're not sure what was explained and what wasn't explained. It is revealed that 15 out of 79, this is a hospital, donors received treatment for, this is a side effect. The syndrome is a side effect of taking the hormones. 2 women were hospitalized, and some of these patients ended up donating oocytes more than once, which again brings up the question whether they were properly explained that this syndrome is because of the hormones and it is related to these donations, or brings up the question how desperately they needed the money that they went through it a second time or a third time. So what was Wang's motivation to lie? So first of all, there's this personal ego and desire for fame and recognition. I think I don't need to explain this one. Previous achievements were being doubted. So he had previous achievements in animal cloning, but he published it in the media and not in, not in journals. So it wasn't peer reviewed. And some people believed him, but some people were doubting him. So by publishing these in Science, he cemented his place as a serious scientist. Other groups claimed to be close to publication, and he wanted to beat them. He wanted to be the first one, even though he wasn't actually able to do that. He believed that he would be able to achieve what he claimed. So according to all reports, he was a serious scientist. So it is possible that he would have achieved it given more time, but he, decided to publish it in 2004. Another possibility is that after lying in 2004, he had to continue lying in 2005 because he made such outrageous claims that, he had to continue with this momentum and he had to publish something else, something even bigger. Pressure from the university and the government. So after, making such claims for years, even before the 2004 publication, he probably was under a lot of pressure to do something big. And Time magazine even wrote that up until Wang, everybody knew Korea for its soap operas and not for its cutting edge science. And now here's this worldwide renowned scientist doing incredible things that nobody else can do. Number of oocytes used. So the reason he wanted to minimize the amount of oocytes used wasn't because he was trying to cover up the fact that he was violating bioethical rules. It was because he wanted to claim that his method was more effective than what other people were doing. If it took 270 oocytes to clone Dolly, he wanted to show that he needed even less than that to clone humans. So he lied about that as well. And why did he think he could get away with it? I mean, he made these radical claims, especially in 2005. He must have known that he's going to be caught, but actually it is very difficult to replicate results in stem cell research. Even now, stem cell research is very, very, very expensive, and it is very hard to replicate other people's methods. So even after his publication in 2004, it could have taken people years to just, assemble everything needed to try and replicate his results, especially because he was describing a very technical method that not everybody could do and not everybody had the skills to do. Number of oocytes obtained. So if you do things legally, it is obviously much harder to obtain that amount of oocytes. And if he had over 2,000 oocytes and he was unable to do scans, then you can imagine how many oocytes other researchers needed to actually achieve this. Other groups were close to creating scans. So in human cells, it was possible, and it is possible because they've been able to do that since. So it wasn't such a huge line. Even if other people had, slightly less ideal results, then, his research still looks legitimate. The data looked real until it was very closely inspected. So only in 2006, people started really questioning his work and closely inspecting all of the supplementary data, and this is where they found the discrepancies. So possibly he would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for the student that ratted him out and contacted the American partner, and the American partner was afraid of being caught. Korean culture and support from the public and the government. So his students, the ones that were in his lab, did not report him. They went along with him and his lies. And even the people he worked with at the hospital didn't want to report them because they were afraid because of the structure of the Korean society. He was also considered a national hero in 2004 when he was being investigated, and in 2006, it was considered unpatriotic not to support him. So, that's why they covered up for his violations in 2004. So it wasn't, this international thing. Maybe, the government or somebody would have swept it aside. His conviction and comeback.
Maria, we are running a little bit out of time. How many more slides do you have?
This is it. This is the end. Conclusion.
And so go ahead. Yeah. Right.
So conviction and comeback. So he was sentenced to 2 years in prison for embezzlement and bioethical violations. So he was sentenced to 2 years in prison. I don't think he actually served those in prison because he appealed several times, but this is the original sentence. Many scientists share the reluctance to support Wong, but his career in the private sector is thriving. So he's a very wealthy person right now for cloning dogs. Second conclusion, so he wasn't actually able to create the scanned human ES lines, but he was the first case of, I don't want to go into this because there's no time, but he was able to do something else that was amazing. But because it was fraudulent research and he didn't do it properly, he didn't notice this thing that he could have possibly published in Science and was actually a real discovery that he made. Scanned human cells is possible, was later proven by other labs. Some of his techniques proved to be very effective and indeed innovative. So he is a good scientist, but untrustworthy. So in 2007, Yamanaka's factors replaced the scan technology and eliminated the need for oxygenation. So theoretically, if you just, waited for a couple of years, this is all would have been unnecessary. His American partner was criticized for taking more credit than he should have. The investigation concluded that he did very little, thus he was not liable for the fraud committed by Wong. So the conclusion here is don't take credit for something that you didn't do, because if something is wrong and you didn't look into it, then you'll have a problem. I returned to work in the field of animal cloning and runs a lucrative company in South Korea. This is the bibliography if you want to read my sources, and these are the points for discussion.
Terrific, thank you. So let's open this for discussion. As you can see, many parallels to the Sean story. I have yet another question that is not here on the 3 green boxes, which is, how do you make sure it doesn't happen to you or to your PI? So turn on your mics and you can barge in and say whatever you feel like saying. Go ahead. I do want to hear you guys. And just
someone is trying to get in, Shimon.
I think I just let them in.
Okay.
Okay. Any comments?
I'm not sure if donating oocytes is unethical, because people do it.
For IVF, for their own benefit.
Yes.
But why should you donate oocyte for somebody else?
No, what I was saying was unethical. It's paying people for it, that it's unethical to pay for it. If you want to do it voluntarily, then go ahead, even though now donors are limited to 2 times, 2 donations in their lifetime. But that's what I meant by unethical, that it's unethical to pay people for it.
Still,
why? Why is it unethical to pay for that? I mean, I don't see any problem.
Just a minute. Let me just say one word before we budge in, but I'm very happy that we are going to have a discussion. It's actually a very difficult process. Females who have difficulties, getting in pregnant, go through IVF, take hormones. It's painful, it's difficult, it's expensive. This is not a simple procedure. It's not like donating blood or even sperm. It's difficult. It has some health risks. So even before we talk, yes, paying for this or not paying for this, just the idea of going through something that is dangerous to your own health has issues. So it's not that trivial. Yeah, go ahead. Whatever you wanted to say. And, why not pay?
He did fraud and all, but just to stay updated, embryonic stem cell lines has been made in lab now, and they can be differentiated.
Of course, well, once you can do reprogramming, this whole idea of oocyte is gone, and it's so much better, right?
Right.
So that's the future, and I think Maria mentioned the 2007 Yamanaka, or whatever his name is.
Yamanaka,
yeah. So that was the big revolution. So now we don't need the oocytes to do that. More. So there was a question, why not paying? Can you elaborate a little bit more? Who was that, Avi?
I asked, I mean, if someone wants to sell their oocytes, I mean, why not? I mean, they can do whatever they want. It's their body. I mean, I don't see any, except for what you mentioned, that maybe that's a good reason if it can actually have.
Yeah, well, I don't think Helsinki allows that. I mean, yeah, I mean, people are selling body parts, and there is some illegal trade. There is illegal trade of body parts. Like if you need an implant and you cannot get it, you can actually buy it. It's illegal.
Kidneys, we've got the same issue with kidneys.
Yeah, but there are stories about, Chinese authorities harvesting body parts from inmates. There was a big scandal in, the Jewish Syrian community in Deal, New Jersey. They were dealing with body parts, and there are a lot. Once you open it up, that becomes very dangerous game. So I think Helsinki doesn't allow what you are suggesting. More? Any parallels between what Wang did and Sean? What drives scientists? What kind of ego you need to be willing to cheat? What are the gains? I mean, becoming very famous, right? Maybe getting Nobel Prize. But what happens if you fall? What kind of personality do you need to have in order to push yourself all the way to publish fraudulent science?
I think it's more related to the culture of where you're living, because as we can see in this example, he's thriving. He currently has a business, if I understood correctly, and he's in a private sector. So he did abused his knowledge, but he gained for it. I don't think he could have done that in the USA, but in China or in South Korea or in
possibly. I mean, he has some financial gains. Sean ended up as an engineer in a company, but nobody knows exactly what he's doing nowadays. I don't think he's a very rich person. He was shamed, and people got away from him. I guess what this guy is doing is cloning people's pets. I would love to get my dog back so some people are willing to pay for this.
$100,000 if you're interested.
Yeah, so that's a very lucrative proposition, that you can get exactly the dog you lost. You keep it forever. yeah, people will pay for this. So yeah, I guess he was kind of thrown into, how do you say this in English? In the marketplace, he was tarred, but he got the best out of it. I mean, it was a bad situation, but at least he's making some money. And I agree, not all cultures will allow him to kind of find this alternative career. Okay, I think we spent enough time. We need to move on. Hadar, you are going next. So Maria, you can answer your presentation. Please send it to me. And Hadar, you can take over.
Okay. Okay. So can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So hi everyone. My name is Hadar and I'm a PhD student at the Department of the Life Science. I will start with a short anecdote. Papers in leading psychology, economy, and science journals that fails to replicate and therefore are less likely to be true are often the most cited papers in academic research. Today I will talk about Andrew Wakefield. Andrew is a British anti-vaccine activist, former physician who was struck off the medical register for his involvement in the Lancet MMR autism fraud. His study falsely claimed a link between the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine and autism. The paper was published in the Lancet in 1998, and it was retracted in 2010. As I said before, Andrew published his paper on autism in the journal The Lancet, claiming to have identified a novel link to autism. However, other researchers were unable to reproduce his findings, and his study retracted in scientific terms. This means that the paper is not part of the scientific record because it was found to be based on scientific misconduct. Almost 4,000 articles were cited in Andrew's article. So what is the MMR vaccine? The MMR vaccine is a vaccine against measles, mumps, and rubella. The MMR vaccine is a mixture of live weekend viruses of the three diseases. רק למי שלא יודע, זה חצבת חזרת הדבק. Side effects of immunization are generally mild and go away without any specific treatment. This may include fever as well as pain or redness at the injection site. Severe allergic reaction occur in about 1 in a million people. But if you have a measles, you can be blind or even cause to your death. The first dose is generally given to children around 9 months to 15 months of age, with a second dose at 15 months to 6 years of age. After 2 doses, you almost protect from those 3 diseases. So why aren't people getting vaccinated? So lack of access, vaccine side effect, lack of trust in the vaccines, lack of trust in the institution, and some conspiracy theory. So going back to Wakefield research, the hypothesis of this article is basically based on research that was done on 12 children that got the MMR vaccine and started to show the sign of intestinal inflammation, and eventually they have developed autism. At this article, 12 children were under research. 11 of them were males and 1 of them was female. In my opinion, should be an equal number of females and males at the experiment in order to decrease the variance between the patients. A good study will include many participations, and Wakefield study included only 12 children. Also, Wakefield attempted to analyze 2 major dissimilar illnesses, autism and IBD, the inflammation, and to study their possible relation to a medical procedure, the MMR vaccine, used to prevent yet another dissimilar illnesses, all in the same study. So there was 12 children at the experiment. And here the graph, you can see only 8 of them. So where are the other 4 patients? Most obvious of all, good researchers will tell the truth, even if their findings are not as they had anticipated or hoped. Watford particularly handpicked the 12 children in his study based on how well their symptoms fit with the outcome that he had, and the lawyer who was paying him nearly £500,000 desired. He also omitted undesirable data about the participants and included additional fabricated data. At this slide, you can see the results that were attached to the article: endoscopic view of terminal ileum in one child, child number 3, and in a child with endoscopically and histologically normal ileum and colon. Andrew shows only one picture like that from one patient, child number 3. What about the other patients? And again, here you can see an H&E staining, hematoxylin and eosin. Here again, the pictures were taken from the same child, child number 3, and no other information about the other patients. So Wong published his paper claiming to have identified a novel form to enterocolitis linked to autism. In 2010, the General Medical Council found that Wong had been dishonest in his research, had acted against his patients' best interest, and mistreated developmentally delayed children. The Lancet, that is the journal, specifically refers to claims made in the paper that the 12 children in the study were patients that appeared for the treatment. But when the GMC, the General Medical Council, found several had been selected especially for this study. The paper also claimed that the study was approved by the appropriate ethics committee when the GMC found that it has not been. Despite the small size of this article, that it was 12 children, the uncontrolled design and speculative nature of the conclusion, the paper received wide publicity, and MMR vaccination rates began to drop because parents were concerned about the risk of autism after the MMR vaccine. So before publication of WOCVID, the rate of the MMR in the United Kingdom was 92%. And after publication, the rate dropped to below 80%. And by 2008, there were 1,348 cases of MMR with 2 confirmed deaths. The journalist on the WOCVID case, Brian Deere, had earlier reported on the false implication of the vaccine in the etiology of autism. In 1998, Andrew Rockfield published a fruitful paper about 12 children reported with both symptoms and autism or other disorder acquired soon after administration of the MMR vaccine, while supporting a competing vaccine. Between 2002 and 2004, numerous studies published find no link between MMR and autism. And finally, in 2010, WOCVID research was found by the General Medical Council to have been dishonest, and the lesson fully retracted the paper. There were a few financial and scientific conflicts that Dr. WOCVID did not reveal in his paper. For instance, part of the cost of Dr. WOCVID research were paid by lawyers for parents that was seeking to sue vaccine makers for damage. Also, Dr. Wakefield was found to have patent in 1997 a measles vaccine that would succeed if the combined vaccine were withdrawn or discreted. At the very bedrock of science is the concept of falsification. A scientist runs a test, gathers his findings, and tries to disapprove himself by replicating his experiment in other contexts. But here, Wakefield couldn't do that. According to Hears, no evidence of any link between the MMR vaccine and autism. There are many studies that have investigated this issue. And going back again to Brian Deere, Brian Deere wrote a book that focused on Andrew Wakefield, a man behind the first publication that drew links between the MMR vaccine and autism in the 90s. The story of how he reached the point of publication, as well as the storm that erupted as a result, is astonishing. And the shockwaves of Wakefield research are also explored as the anti-vaccine movement continues to gain momentum and influence all over the world. Of course, now we will give a Wakefield response. So Andrew gave his statement after the British Medical Journal and reporter Brian Deere alleged this was a hoax and an elaborate fraud, and that his motivation was profit. So we will read part of the statement from Dr. Andrew Wakefield. I want to make one thing crystal clear for the record. My research and the serious medical problems found in those children were not a hoax, and there were no fraud whatsoever. Nor did I seek to profit from our findings, despite media reports to the contrary. The results of my research have been duplicated in 5 other countries. I continue to fully support more independent research to determine its environmental triggers, including vaccine, are causing autism and other developmental problems. I've lost my job, my career, and my country. To claim that my motivation was profit is patently nature. I will not be deterred. This issue is far too important. So when the original article was picked up by the general media, the findings were fooled by speeches and public appearance in which Wakefield recommended a single vaccine rather than the combined MMR. Many parents seeking a cause for their children's illnesses says upon the apparent link between the routine vaccination and autism. And also you can see here pictures from a lot of supported family of this Andrew Wakefield. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So obviously, Wakefield had enormous impact till this day. You all know about the anti-vax groups. Although his paper was discredited many times over, the anti-vax, theories are thriving. I just want to bring up the COVID vaccine to kind of balance this. When people said that they don't want to take the vaccine, they were ridiculed. All the newspapers and politicians and everybody was saying that, these are anti-vax, they are stupid, they don't understand science and so on. Well, it so happens that Johnson & Johnson vaccine had some issues, and even Pfizer and Moderna, on very, very low percentage of people who get the vaccine, there are some issues. There are some clotting and type of long COVID symptoms for some people who take the vaccine. So I want to open this for a discussion because obviously every story has two sides, but obviously this one person alone started a huge movement all around the world based on false science. And you cannot eradicate this movement. And kids are dying because their parents don't want to vaccinate them. So, especially nowadays in the era of social media, it's very easy to disseminate, false theories and get believers to, go on barricades. Very complicated issue. Thank you, Hadar, for bringing it up, and I open it for discussion. Go ahead. Want to hear you guys.
Simon, what's your personal opinion regarding this vaccine for COVID?
Sorry, again?
Personal opinion on this vaccination for COVID?
I don't understand.
I'm asking, what's your personal opinion?
My personal opinion? It's clear that MMR, everybody in all the world, this vaccine is being administered. It's saving, billions of babies, basically. These are very dangerous diseases for babies. Like anything else, every drug and every vaccine could have some side effects. There are some very, very small numbers of patients who will not respond well. That's a risk you have to consider. But everybody nowadays in the anti-vax movement believe that there is a link between this vaccine and autism, which is simply not true. And you cannot eradicate this belief. It's there. It's a doing of one person.
But we have data for trials, like vaccines get approved if it has gone through first trial, second trial, and third trial. Okay, and all over the result is fine.
So the FDA went through trials for COVID vaccines, and they did actually a very large number very quickly, and they came up to the conclusion that those vaccines are safe, and they are. But now 2 years after more than a year after the introduction of the vaccine, we now have more data because we have hundreds of millions, if not billions, of people who took the vaccine, and now you can start to see the small numbers, right? So, I'm sure that's the case with MMR as well. There will be some small number of infants who will not respond well to this vaccine. So yes, there is a true risk in everything, but you have to weigh the benefit and the risk. And the anti-vax people just look at the risk. They don't look at the benefits.
They also look at unsubstantiated risk.
Yeah, but the point is that false science made it into popular belief. There are now movements. Those are cults, almost. And you cannot take this out. You cannot prove to them that this is bad science.
No, but the question is why people believed this person if he has such a small data, only for...
Well, this is sociological questions that I cannot answer. How come people go after cult leaders and go into cult and destroy their lives?
But how did Lancet accept it? Like, why did I understand why regular people believed it, but how did Lancet editors believe that?
And also this paper
Well, I think we touched upon this before. What is the role of journal editors? What is the role of you? Are we supposed to discover fraudulent science, or we just need to point out if the experiments were done properly? In general, and I think I showed a few slides on this, peer review doesn't work. Peer review doesn't really separate good science from bad science. And now there is some research done on peer review. I'm not sure what is the value of peer review. We are all doing it, but it's not clear if there is a real added value that really makes science better. We are in this era where we ask ourselves how to do science better. We talked about meta-science as a new discipline. And all these cases that I brought and the cases that you're going to bring for the rest of this course are questioning actually the way we do science and how we communicate science to the public. And this question really became, it was under spotlight during the pandemic because there were so many opposing reports from scientists and confused the public. So what is the responsibility of scientists? You want to publish the first, whatever, sequence of the virus. You want to publish the first cryo-EM structure of its polymerase. Okay, those are things that are easy to judge, but, there were lots of papers about treatments in the initial phase of the pandemic. You all remember Trump suggesting using bleach and all kinds of crazy stuff. And some of that showed up in publications. And again, peer review is not really being able to say, yeah, this is good, this is bad. It doesn't do that. So Lancet published that paper. And the guy got lots of attention from the popular media, gave lots of interviews, and probably has nice charisma that, some people started to believe him. And now you cannot, it's a cult and you cannot take it out. It's so rooted in those circles. How do you undo this?
There is a similar notion, you might say, about Wi-Fi radiation or cellular radiation. And one case in particular that I know of about 20 years ago, it has been reported in Israel that some incubators for babies have slightly more radiation levels than non-ionizing radiation levels.
Excellent point.
And I think about 20 parents took off their babies off the incubators. And I thought when I read it, oh my God, the babies are in immediate
Very danger, right?
Danger.
Okay, but what about cellular phones? So
cellular phone were in one. No, I don't think about. No, it was from the electric grid, electric field. One paper found there might have been a correlation in cancer and leukemia, and research that I have been participating in Israel said that the results have not been published because it was an international.
I don't want to dwell too much on this, but I would argue that the jury is still out. We don't know enough about EMF in terms of health impact. Obviously, when you have high power radiation, whatever frequency range is, but at very high power, there could be all kinds of effects, mostly heating, but maybe other. In fact, I'm signed on a paper that deals with EMF and heart muscle. So, but I think, again, there are some calls about EMF and people take down cell towers and all kinds of things like that. Science is not good enough. I can tell you, I was in the Israeli Air Force for many years. People who dealt with high power radars had very high cancer occurrences. And that was shut down because that was a state secret. So radiation has damaging effects. It's not clear exactly to what level, and the science is not good enough. And I think the jury is still out. Obviously, taking cell towers out is kind of extreme. But if you have a very high power tower just next to your house, you probably want to buy a house somewhere else, right?
I just want to comment about that.
Sure.
I have been assisting in measuring those radiation levels near cellular towers, etc. In most cases, the levels do not reach dangerous, even not.
They used to be. They used to be. The technology is better. As you go to higher frequency, you can go at lower power and so on. But it used to be very high power, and you had radiation. So yeah, the technology is getting better. But to say categorically that there is no effect, I think the jury
we
still
don't say that. But as far as I know, the levels do not reach even closely to. I mean, in a building environment, not in really near 1 meter away or something like that. Don't. Okay. My advice is don't sleep with your charger near your head, but right. You can just.
So don't sleep with a charger near your head. I think that's a good advice. I don't want to go into this because we can deal with this forever. It's a long topic, and I don't think it's really, the science, in my view, is not good enough yet, and there is no conclusion yet, so I don't want to make any statement. But yes, I think that vaccination or RF radiation are kind of similar concepts, and we need to all be very informed and before we make decisions. Yes, somebody wanted to say something?
As we have discussed earlier, we are in a trap to publish papers, more and more number.
So Sri, we have some problems getting your audio. Maybe you can just send your comment in chat. That will be easier. Somebody else wanted to say something?
Yes. What I realized in this talking from Adar, then if we back in the graph, then it showed when the people stopped to take the vaccines, we can see then the article was published in 98. And you all the time say about the social media and things like this. And if you stop to think about it, then only when the article was retracted, then was in 2010, you can see a really high number of people that doesn't want to take the vaccine. So if the retraction maybe was before in 2005 and things like this, like science, maybe they didn't reach exactly the boom of the technology. Because if you think about it, in 2000, like the WhatsApp, I think was created in 2012, and the Twitter and also Facebook 2008 almost didn't exist. So if the science could reach this 10 years, like the article was published in 98 and they only retract this 12 years after.
Yeah, I actually think exactly the opposite. I think that nowadays with Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, it's so much easier. Yes, you can disseminate the right, good science, good information, but it's as easy to disseminate, false theories and build cults. So I would guess the numbers of people who are against vaccines is larger, not smaller nowadays. I don't have the statistics with me, but I think that as any other technology, social media technology can be used for really good things and can be abused as well. So I want to read Sri's comment because we couldn't hear him well. I thought to share that, as you have mentioned earlier classes, the focus has been on the number of papers these days rather than the quality of the work. So yeah, that's a general comment, which is correct. I mean, what is the incentives of scientists? But I don't think that directly relates to the topic here of the vaccination or anti-vax movement. But that is a comment that might be relevant to the previous presentation by Maria. Any other urgent comments before we move to the last one for today? All right, if no other comments, then Chen, you're next.
Okay, I'm sharing my screen. Just a second. Okay, great. So, good evening. My name is Shukun, and I'm doing right now a bachelor degree in electrical engineering in Bar-Ilan. And today I would like to tell you a story about the reinvention of calculus. So during the course, we were encouraged to tell a good story, an interesting story. So this presentation is going to follow the Freytag pyramid, which is one of the famous ways to create drama, to create the plot in thematic literature and drama essays. So let's start with the exposition. Each good story has the main characters, and our main characters are going to be the ancient scientists, the Egyptians, the Babylonians, and the Greeks, Isaac Newton and Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, the inventors of the calculus theory as we know it today, and Mary M. Tai, the author of our main paper in discussion today, which I shall present anon. Settings, February 1924, the date of, and the inciting incident is the publication of the paper, a mathematical model for the determination of total area under the graph of glucose tolerance and other metabolic curves. I'm so sorry, the title has been cut off. So it should be determination of total area under the graph of and continuation of the sentence. So, and it is very sad mistake because I'm sure you are very familiar with the term total area under the graph, and it should ring a bell for my fellow scientists. So let's move on and we shall decipher what those words mean. So we are going to the rising action and to the integral. So early estimations of integral can be tracked back even to 50 before counting Babylon. Here we can see in the rough estimation that they used in Babylon in order to track stars in the sky, in the night sky. And in the 19th century, Newton and Leibniz have developed independently the calculus theory, which gives the mathematical background of the whole notion and idea of the integral, which, as I'm sure you are familiar and you know it, is used to calculate the area under the graph. So let's move on. Okay, so let's now look at our paper, mathematical model for the determination of total area under glucose tolerance and other metabolic curves. And the paper itself was published in the respectful journal Diabetes Care, founded in 1978. It was not a new journal. And here we can see the impact factor of the journal as function of the years. And I'm sorry, I'm going to move this bar up here because so we can see that the journal has not been affected because of this publication paper, and it's just the impact factor is increasing through the years, and even in around the time of the publication of the paper, 1994, it has relatively good impact factor. Not we can't ignore it as a bad journal. And the problem and motivation are defined and stated clearly in the paper, as well as the developed method. And the paper has around 481 citations. So what is this paper about? It is, so the one and only figure of this paper, I think, tells us the whole story. And because this paper presents us the trapezoidal rule, which I'm sure, again, you are most familiar with. This trapezoidal rule helps to estimate the area under the graph by having an epsilon as small as we wish in length between two points in the x-axis, and then assuming the curve to be linear and calculating the trapeze under its curve. And then if we take those points to be close enough together, we can estimate the whole area. I would like to note that in the paper, there is a, forgot the word, comparison of different results of her methods to other methods. And I will talk about those methods later, but as we talk about the paper also included reference to other methods for calculations and showed that her method, which is in the fourth column here, is the most accurate. The reference for her comparison was drawing the graph on millimeter paper and then counting all those cubes, all the little cubes with millimeter paper. Just not, but there has been a trial to show a comparison of result. So why there was a need for Thai's proposed method for calculating the area under the graph? There was none. The short answer, sadly, there was no need for this paper, or there was. And let's see, but on the field, on the surface of it, in mathematical point of view, there was no need whatsoever for her method. Since Babylonian times, we have far better techniques to calculate the integral. So the climax. The method and the integral by itself contribution to the diabetes field, which is the field that Thai's paper is related to and talks about the glucose curves, and to the science fields in general, is undoubtedly clear. Sadly, it is not a novel one. As I mentioned, it is a well-known method and well-known concept. This this paper gives rise to several interesting questions that I would like to discuss today. The first one is, how can it be that Thai herself did not find this method in the literature? Was the integral not used in her field? It seems not very likely. Why Thai's mentor and the editors of the journal failed to recognize this method? In other words, where has the peer-reviewed process failed? We have talked about this in great detail this course, and again, we are returning to this point. The third question is, why is this paper cited as a reference for Thai's model in 2009? Have we learned nothing from this example? And as we see in the following slides, there are many more sites than just this citation in 2009. And the fourth question that I would like to discuss is what can be learned from this paper regarding the science method? So we are coming to the following action in order to resolve our burning questions. So if we want to talk about what has gone wrong, why did Thai herself did not found the methods for calculating the integral in the literature, why her methods fail, I think we would want to start in the introduction, because one of the important parts of the scientific method is to know the history of the field in whichever field you're talking about, and most of the time it is located in the introduction. So let's see what Thai's introduction has to reveal to us. She mentioned 3 citations that, as she presents it, 3 formulas have been developed by Elder, Veshu et al. And Wolfer et al. To calculate the total area under a curve. The first one, as I searched, is indeed a mathematical book, but it is not a graph theory book or a calculus book. It is a geometrical book. So we can understand where she got the inspiration for the trapezoidal rule, but it's unclear, and I don't have an answer to that. Why didn't she go to the right books, which contains integral related information? The 2 other citations are medicine and diabetes related papers that used various methods and not, again, not mathematical references. As I mentioned, they are just medical papers, and it is so we can guess and we can, I think, assume correctly that she tried to find information. She put an effort to find methods in the literature. She did not find the correct references, and she developed her own method, which is noble concept, and which is noble, I mean, a good concept. This is how science should be made, but it is very clear that the history background was incomplete in this case, and it gives another alarming conclusion that it might indicate that this lack of knowledge regarding calculus is not a one-time occurrence, but a prominent event in the field. Science, we have here both references in the medical papers, which again try to create formulas for calculating the area under a curve. So it is quite alarming. Again, okay. So now I'm now a student for electrical engineering, and I have been a physics student, and we all love to joke about biology and biology student. I'm sure you are familiar with memes like, I am a biologist, what does it mean? It means that he's afraid of doing math. No, he doesn't, etc., etc., or something like calculus and the different reactions math students, physics students, engineering students, and biology students react to it. But I don't want you to disregard this, because just remember that this is how physics consider a bird, just a bird. So each field has its own values, and each field should be respected. But sadly, if we, as we can see anon, if we continue to ignore each other uniqueness and good points, we are not creating good science or not advancing science forward, at least. So I want now to go with a timeline, starting at the year of the publication, right after the publication, the impact of the paper right after publication, and going through the years and to see what has, how this paper was accepted and which discussions arise from it. So first of all, 4 different comments have been published on the same paper in the same journal, Diabetes Care, regarding this paper, stating undoubtedly that Thais' model is the trapezoidal rule. And one comment in particular is from one of the authors of the references that Thais used. And he said that this method has been used by those of us in the field for many years, and in my opinion, does not need a new name. Another thing he claims that he criticized how Thais, how Thais used his formula incorrectly, because he says that his formula is not meant to be used as Thais presented it. So her result, or her comparing result in the table, is completely wrong, and he was not very happy about that. Now, let's move on in time. About 20 years after the publication of the paper, there has been a very interesting discussion thread in the academia Stack Exchange, which is a sub-forum for scholars and academic people. And it was so interesting that one blogger commented on this thread, and he noted several important ideas arising from this. So as he says, the first question might lie in wondering why no one out in the author, her colleagues, the reviewers, or the journal editor had ever seen this before, or something like it, which is, as I said, quite alarming. How can the peer review fail to this extent in the medicine field, again, and not some irrelevant sect, spiritual, or something that is speculation, science, or something like that, medicine. And another thing that he mentioned, which I think is very relevant and correct, is this whole case demonstrates that it is perfectly possible for someone who has never seen a wheel to invent the wheel. And the technique has been brought to a new audience, albeit about 4 centuries later. He, of course, relates to Newton's and Leibniz's contribution to the field. But as I mentioned, this method and the notion, the idea of the integral has been known for thousands of years, not only that. And another thing, that it's not the only case. It might have happened again and again. Some cases or relevant people in the field notice this and comment about this to alarm the other science community. Sometimes it happens only years later. And it makes one wonder about how much published research is genuinely innovative and how much is non-innovative stuff discovered independently, which again, it has its own contribution, its own assurance that this has been done correctly. As I mentioned previously, Newton and Leibniz invented the calculus theory independently. So that's not necessarily a bad thing to reinvent something that has been invented yet. This is not the problem here. That's what I want to state. Perhaps the most disturbing thing is that 20 years later, the paper is still being cited, and not in ironic way. This is alarming as well. So this brings us to today, to 2022. Some papers that cite Thais' paper mention that she describes the trapezoidal method and they mention it, that they are aware that this is the trapezoidal method, but they cite her work, which is a good paper by itself. It is a perfectly good paper because she mentioned a well-known and well-defined method. So there is nothing wrong with citing this. But one mentions Thais' paper as a reference. It is unclear whether or not the authors are informed about the true origins of it, as we can see in this screenshot that I had copied here. The total area under the curve was calculated. This acronym is not used in mathematics. It was just total area under curve, and it isn't clear why they, whether or not they know about it. So, resolution. We have come to the end of our presentation, and if we want to integrate what we have learned by trapezoidal rule or otherwise, let's see what we gained, hopefully, today. So the first thing is that even though the method is not novel, Thais' paper has introduced and made it more popular in her field. As we can see here, this is the citation graph, and her paper just continuously gaining relevance. It is very alarming, I do admit, but if if she did not publish her paper, I don't want to know what would happen to all those people who might come into incorrect formulas. At least it is a good, well-defined formula, and there is no need, there is no, as far as I understood it, there is no, there's nothing wrong with the formula itself. So those results are hopefully correct and hopefully cited on as a good reference. The second thing is the importance of a good history background. One should know what has been done before him, even in fields that are not closely related to his own. I'm sure she is a great scientist in her field, but her mathematical background was lacking, as we can infer from her publication. The impact of comments and criticism. If you click in the article today, it is very clear that this article has comments. It is linked in the website. And even before the internet era, is the fact that the journal itself published 4 comments about it is a good thing, because the same audience that has read Thais' model, the Thais paper about her model in the first place, are now welcomed to read the comments about it and rethink about whether or not they should use her reference as the whole reference or just one reference of your list, which is again good paper. I have nothing about this. And one also should consider the importance of multidisciplinary knowledge exchange. I am sure that if she just knocked over to the 4th or 2nd floor where the mathematicians are with just a little bribe of pizza or something like that, they will be more than happy to help her calculate the area under the graph. So it's not a bad thing to admit that you don't know something and thinking who can help you acquire this knowledge, even in your own research. And finally, I think that we should always take a little bit of nechama. I'm sorry, I don't know how to say it in English, just to be a little bit happy, I guess, that even when we make mistakes, our contribution to the field might not be forgotten and might not be completely neglected, because people can learn from our mistakes as long as they are aware that our work was not perfect, and we are human beings. So even if we make mistakes, it's fine. It's fine. We just need to admit it and accept criticism while it's well due. And the numbers here, in her case, speaks for themselves. The method is good. The paper is well written, and I might understand people with not from mathematical background that are inclined to cite her paper because they can understand it better. So because it speaks to them in their own language, one can say. So that's, in my opinion, her contribution. Thank you very much.
All right, great. Thank you. You can unshare your presentation. Everybody turn on your cameras. So let me come first with my comments. This is 1994. The PC was introduced, I think, in 81 or 82. But in 94, most biologists still are not used to do quantitative work with computers. For you guys, you cannot imagine how to basically calculate the area under graph else than using some kind of a mathematical package on your computer, trivial. But she most likely was trained, like I was, with sliding rulers, and I had Texas Instrument 59, which was a programmable calculator with 1,000 lines of code. Those were different days. A lot of the calculations and data analysis was done graphically. But it's pretty funny, just, you have to admit it. Reinventing the formula to calculate area, an integral area under a curve it's really, really funny. So thank you, Chen, for bringing this example. This is a great example of not fraudulent science, but other issues that we have that we try to emphasize during the course of how we could do science better. All right, let's open it up for discussion. There was nothing fraudulent here. I mean, she was honest and she did her job and everything is okay. But it's funny.
How could it receive so many citations? I don't understand. And
I think some of the later citations, my guess, I haven't looked into this, but are most likely just, pointing to the fact that she reinvented the integral, I guess. But
and another thing, how could it pass review? I mean, people know what is an integral.
Well, this point we visited many times over. Peer review doesn't work, right? Well, it works. It works somewhat. but it has many issues. It's funny. I mean, this is a great story. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Why didn't she or any other of her colleagues answer the comments that said that she reinvented something that was already? Why?
Well, it is. Some of the comments were saying exactly that.
Yes. Why didn't she answer them or
write
and then rejected the paper after seeing those comments?
So I don't know, but Chen, could you find any response from her?
No, I could not.
As long as the paper is not retracted or the editor doesn't ask you to respond to some comments, you're not obliged to do anything. Look,
I did not.
I guess she did not work with PC, definitely not with a mainframe. But you know, it's 94. I mean, it's already Windows. I don't know which version. I mean, everybody had it. Everybody, but in her field, I guess. And I don't know how old was she when she published that paper. Maybe she was, you know, more mature scientist who was trained, you know, in a very specific way before computers, and all the analysis was simple. You had graphs and you whatever, you calculated.
She's unreachable electronically.
And yeah, so it's hard to go and, I mean, we can try to investigate and find all of this stuff, but it's just so funny. And yeah, every now and then you run into a paper where eventually you figure out it's reinvention of the wheel, and then somebody will comment about this. If you are not well versed with your field and the history of your field, you will think that you have something original, you'll publish it, maybe the peer reviewers will not catch it. And later on, it's found to be a reinvention of the wheel. And every now and then you'll see that. So, you know, nowadays it's impossible to really know the literature that well. So what people are relying on, instead of remembering and knowing the history well of your particular subfield, you do searches. And the search is as good as the terms you put in the search. So you have Google Scholar, and you have other types of scientific searches, and hopefully if you do a good search, you'll come up with all the important papers that you want to cite, because you don't really know all the history well. But if your search wasn't great, then you'll miss some stuff. And then if it's important, somebody will tell you at some point. So it's getting harder and harder. When I was trained as a scientist and you went into a field, you kind of knew the field. Nowadays, with this exponential growth of number of journals, number of papers, it's an impossible task. More comments. So before we disperse, I just want to make a comment about next week. We have only 2 sign up for next week. This is John and David. And I think I also...
Shimon also signed up for the next week.
So
maybe
it's not on
scroll it.
It's not...
No, you will scroll it. When you will scroll it, maybe in the end, I put it in the 4th top or something. Because mine was on 3rd, so I shifted it to 17th because of the holiday.
Okay, all right, great. So we have 3. I don't see it on the sheets, but just check.
Okay.
Okay.
I will check it again.
Okay. Any other comments about Chen's presentation or general comments?
I would like to thank Ron Cohen, who just sent me that the Thai indeed published a review, which I am sorry I neglected to notice. And
in the chat, you can see the link.
Yeah, you can see the link. It's very interesting.
What does she say? What does she say in this review? Does she? She
thanks her commenters.
Okay.
And then she said that she started working about in 1981, and she worked in the Columbia University. She claims that it is not a common sense, the concept behind it, and she took a very long time, and she claims that it is, of course, not Nobel Prize material, but she wanted to popularize it.
There is a whole discussion, yeah. So
there is a whole discussion, and it's very interesting to see us. So thank you very much, Ron.
Okay, great. Yeah, great investigative job, Ron. So yeah, anybody who is interested can read follow-up for what Chen presented in this exchange with responses from Thai. Still very funny. Thank you for bringing this story. Any other comments?
If you said that she did it that she searched this for 13 years, it's like the worst nightmare of a scientist, that his life work would be a joke like that.
Well, I don't
waste
think
of time.
I think she justified this. She's not referring to a joke, but I haven't read this. I'm going to read it now. I don't want to hold you too late. But yeah, I mean, the story is so funny and so weird. But you know, science is like any other discipline, any other aspect of life. You'll have good science and bad science, good scientists, bad scientists, crooks, cheaters, and honest people. It's the same percentage that you have in the population. Unfortunately, you know, we think about science as a very pure discipline, and we are all in it to do good. But every now and then we get a slap on our face, and that there are some people who has other motives. They are so driven that they are willing to bend the rules. And I just presented, I think 2 weeks ago, something that came up, you know, just recently. So it's there, and you have to be aware of this, and you need to be absolutely sure that you're not going to, especially once you become PIs, if you're going for academic career, and you start to trust your students, and you don't go over everything that they tell you or they do, that's dangerous, because your students or postdocs or whatever, they can put you in trouble. So if you are in a very competitive lab and you want to gain some edge, some people are willing to bend the rules. Very, very dangerous. So the goal of this course is really to open you a little bit beyond your own little tiny area of research and be aware of the flaws. I mean, there are so many good things about science, but there are flaws, and it's amazing. All the examples that we go through went through peer review. This is just mind-blowing. So the peer review doesn't do the job. Any other comments? If not, I'll let you go, and we'll meet next week. We have 3 presenters for next week. Buckle up. It's going to be fun like this for the rest of the semester. I'm really enjoying it. I hope you do too. All right. Good evening. Bye-bye.
Bye. Good night.
Bye-bye.